So one of the things that, between the work that Hinson and Alex did on the CBOR automation and what Mesh is doing with creating templates, we're about to see a different phase here, right? What Mesh wants to do is make it possible for any NFT project to spin up their own micro NFT exchange. And using the design patterns we've been looking at in this course, once people are able to spin up, their own instance of an exchange like that, then any number of front ends can pop up that expose that contract. And so instead of having monolithic NFT marketplaces, there's going to be these instantiated NFT marketplaces that are collected and presented by whoever wants to make a front end to expose those. And think about the kinds of partnerships that are going to start to emerge. Hey, I'll expose your marketplace if you share mine, right? What's the incentive for a front end provider to expose some collection of those? And if we can do that for NFT marketplaces, we can do it for DEXs. And I do believe that, Gimbal Labs is going to have a micro DEX, right? There will be a liquidity pool provisioned by Gimbal Labs where ADA can be exchanged for gimbals. That's coming in the future, right? And that's at the core of the tokenomics model for people who have been starting to participate in that. But once you build that component once, just like the faucet and just like the GPTE, and the list goes on, that micro DEX component works just like these other examples, right? A group can create one. They can obviously create their own front end for it and try to get people to use it that way, but it goes beyond that. Everybody's going to get to choose, hey, these are the DEXs I want to expose. And what happens next, I'm excited to see, right? Once I might have a project that exposes a bunch of micro DEXs, what are some innovative ways that people can interact with each other? Right? That's what we get to figure out together.
Yeah. So you sort of create the engines for the swaps and everything,
Yep.
and then let whoever wants create the marketplaces and all that. That's interesting. That's a bit like what the guy Jack Mallers from Bitcoin says he's trying to do with Lightning Network and converting fiat from country to country and all that. He's just doing the pipelining, and then anyone can create applications on top of it.
That's right. And that's right. That's kind of the holy grail, right? A lot of the work we're doing right now is we're testing these ideas inside of the Cardano ecosystem. A lot of it is still just in the small Cardano developer community for now, right? Nobody who's not a dev is really looking at GPTE yet. But we test these things here. We start to branch out, okay, to the broader Cardano ecosystem. But what's the end goal? The end goal is that these tools are going to be pushed out into the world of people who are not even thinking about blockchain yet. And so now extend this headless dApps concept of micro exchanges and that kind of thing to exactly what Lucas is talking about. At someday, it's still a few years off, but there's going to be a way to instantiate a fiat on and off ramp.
I like doing that, James. The idea of it, I think it might be an opportunity to kind of be on the edge of pricing things in Lovelaces, and that should be easy to do with the gimbal, right? Mm-hmm. Because at some point that's going to happen in the larger Cardano ecosystem. You'll be thinking in terms of Lovelaces because ADA will be that hard to get.
Looking forward to it.
So
yeah, so wonderful.
Do I'm, you know, because of our conversation the other day, James, I've been thinking about offering a bounty, you know, for something that I would personally like to see, but I think it would be, I was in a conversation on a Twitter space late yesterday with artists, NFT artists. And, you know, I turned the conversation to identity, you know, and how, you know, like an artist, sense of personal identity is going to be different than, you know, a developer or somebody in Africa. And I was talking about, you know, using our art NFTs as an expression of who we feel or what we feel about ourselves as individuals. And, you know, I've got some NFTs that I would like to lock together for the future purpose of perhaps licensing usage. And, you know, what I would like to see is that they get locked in a particular arrangement, because I can change the visual impact by changing the arrangement of them. But I have a hard time in my head thinking about how to like put that in to a locking contract. And I think it's an interesting challenge. And I didn't know if maybe that's interesting enough as a bounty thing for the PBL course to have that as a bounty. What do y'all think about that? Does that make sense? Am I on mute?
No, you're not.
Okay.
It's just too much to digest, to be honest.
So,
I mean, do I get it right that you want to reorder how your NFT is displayed in a collection or in some other way? I just didn't understand the context yet full.
yeah. So like it's I have 4 unsigned algorithms that I think look particularly good grouped together. And when they can be grouped together in different ways and they still look good. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, well, it raises more questions than answers, but okay.
You know,
So-
in JPEG Store, you can group them. You can create a bundle or something. You know that, Steve?
Yeah, just to
Yeah,
sell,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
That doesn't say how to display them though.
Yeah, okay. I think I saw something about that with on 6. I'll ping you if
Yeah.
I find it.
There
Oh.
is, I mean, a specific, you can create your own SIG based off of the combination of the algorithms of the 4 unsigs that you have.
Can I show
I
them?
saw a video on that.
Is it easier if I show them?
That'd be cool. I'd be curious.
Let me find them. Theoretically, I have them, right?
Are you pulling that up?
Yeah.
While you're doing that, yeah, so one of the building blocks towards this, I think, is the updatable metadatum, which among the reasons it was an advantage to slow down a little bit and be waiting until right now to be launching GPTE on mainnet, is that it gave some of us a little bit of time to look at SIP 68 and this concept of updatable metadatum. And I think we're ready to go to be able to use a simple implementation of that on mainnet. At the end of the day, there's still just a policy ID that we have to identify to interact with the dapp. yeah, from the contributor token perspective. And that policy ID can be used to tie it to a reference NFT as SIP68 describes. And then within the inline datum in the UTXO that's living at some, we could talk about where this reference UTXO lives. We've covered that in previous weeks, but that's something we'll definitely have to go back to. But for now, the reference token lives in a UTXO at an address with current datum, and it can be updated. And so we get to pilot that as GPTE rolls out. But once more of us have our heads around how that component works, then things like arranging collections of other NFTs, I think absolutely is a next exploration from there. We've already been talking about that with the Disco team. Alpine brought this concept of, providing like a naked PFP that starts to get attributes and whatever its clothes, its accessories, et cetera, as that metadatum is updated. And so, Steve, what you're describing with unsigs, I think, is just a different flavor of that, right? We say, okay, well, we're referencing these tokens. We could talk about if those tokens should be locked up somewhere to make this possible, but that's optional. And then it's just a matter of saying, well, here's some different representations. And then you would build a front end that looks at the inline datum and uses it to configure those items on a page.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got to change my preferences to be able to do this.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions that are not related to like technical side, which channel I want to just put them to discuss later about the work I did with Hinson. And,
Yeah, I think we need to do a specific presentation of that and where it stands too.
oh yeah, that's one of the questions. First is like Playground is a good place, but I think Catalyst Town Hall is maybe too much for now, yeah?
Okay, so that's a multi-part question. I mean, it could be at Playground anytime. I think it's most appropriate to start here at Live Coding. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring to everybody today is as we look ahead to the future of live coding, and here, Steve, is it okay if I take it away with screen sharing? Let's circle back to the unsig visual because yeah, there are some key things I want to move through with everybody today.
Okay, so I just put for me a note to talk with you about live coding and like the work.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of those organization level things I want to bring to everybody today. Okay, so Gimbal Labs has we can improve in further how work is shared and communicated. So what I want is a better roadmap on gimballabs.com. Okay, this is where we're going. But okay. I'm not rushing into building out new components for the front end of gimballabs.com, and I want to share some responsibilities on that as we continue to build the team. So as a stepping stone towards that, Obsidian makes it easy for me to publish a couple things here. And this is live. Anybody can review this. I'll put the link in our Zoom chat. And there's a GitLab repo that has these files. So anybody can review this. And the idea here is that this is our kind of open source roadmap draft. Anybody here is welcome to drop issues on here. Or if you have comments or just want to start refining docs, we can do that. At a high level, right? Playground is already running. That's the easy part. All we have to do is keep doing it. Dandelion has made progress over the last 2 years, and it's time to level it up. So one priority at the Gimbal Labs organizational level is to convene a group of people who want to help create the first iteration of Dandelion PBL. You can circle back to that. Tokenomics work is ongoing. And here in this group, we're talking Plutus PBL, but necessarily connected to that is the GPTE app. And then besides that list of things, right, there's a couple of partner projects brewing. And like I started with, better communicating from the gimballabs.com front end. At a high level, does anybody have any clarifying questions about these focus areas for Gimbal Labs, or do you see anything missing?
I'm looking at the Dandelion one, and I'm thinking, how could this? What would be the structure of the course? Is it really just setting up Dandelion, or could it involve using it? Because it's probably quite different than other APIs, right? It's not exactly, we can't, yesterday we were talking in another group of using Ogmios versus Dandelion. And I had that question of how different is the implementation from the client application.
Very good. So you're exactly right. So distinct, that's step one. And that's worth it for us to talk about right now. So the relationship between Ogmios and Dandelion, for example, is that Ogmios is a open source project that anyone can deploy. There's some overhead to deploying Ogmios. So Dandelion does that for us. One of the services Dandelion provides is a free instance of Ogmios. And if you look at the Ogmios docs, there's like a big thank you note for Dandelion, right? Because it exposes that service to anybody who's just getting started with building without having to set it up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So Dandelion is not a monolithic endpoint. There's no, right? There's no like dandelion.com/API. What Dandelion does is it takes Ogmios and exposes it. It takes GraphQL. It takes Koyos. It even takes BlockFrost at this point and exposes that. And so, Lucas, you're exactly right. Step one of the course, right? Think about the framework of moving from onboarding to building up background knowledge. At the onboarding stage, we just have to show people, hey, here's what Dandelion is. Here's the list of services. Anybody who's taken Plutus PBL has started to become familiar with GraphQL, maybe with Koyos. Maybe some people have toyed around with the Submit API, for example. So we have to show people how those essentials work. And now you've generated the need to know, well, how can I serve this, right? So now as we move into building background knowledge, this is where we show people, here's how you deploy your own service. And we also have to continue throughout that work, the thread of, here's why this is important, right? Why might I not want to just rely on some monolithic endpoint provider? So we build that up. We show people how to use the services and how to deploy their own services. And then just like in Plutus PBL, we introduce the kind of bleeding edge of that work. The bleeding edge of Dandelion is building up a self-sustaining network where, first of all, you can provide a single endpoint with a load balancer that's running in the background so that this network of as many Dandelion nodes as possible serves those requests. Looks like a simple endpoint. You know, if I want to use the single GraphQL endpoint, that's really drawing on the whole network. And then part of that is incentivizing it, right? It's as much as we know that this layer needs to be distributed, robust, and resilient, just that knowledge is not enough to convince most people to run a node. There has to be an incentive for that. So now Dandelion leads us into this tokenomics conversation. Now, the PBLs that exist so far, Plutus PBL right here, we just finished really the third iteration of the course. The first iteration started September 2021 with just 4 or 5 people, okay? And then a few more people joined in October and November. And it was informal. It was just kind of figuring out, okay, well, what does it feel like to learn together? And we used that experience to then create the draft of what became the initial course in Canvas. That ran from February to April. And then we refined that and launched the course that's currently live right now. With tokenomics, we've done phase 1 at this point. Okay, phase 1 started in January of 2021. We did kind of a freewheeling experience of learning together from January through April. And as we look towards tokenomics PBL, just to zoom in on this one for just a moment, we have some goals for December and then book club in January. But the goal is by the end of Q1 2023 to launch tokenomics PBL. And when that happens, that'll be similar to how Plutus PBL ran from February to April of this year. It'll be kind of the first, it'll be the beta instance, right, of the course, like a live, hey, we've learned a lot. Here's the best syllabus we can make for now, but clearly it's going to be continued to be revised. When it comes to when it comes to Dandelion PBL, as you can see, I haven't fleshed out this roadmap yet. I think this might just be copied and pasted from the Dandelion one. But Dandelion PBL is really going to be at that same stage that Plutus PBL was in September of 2021. The first informal group who's kind of learning together and just drafting out what the course can be. I think it would be okay to imagine that this won't be a fully formed, public facing Canvas course right away, but that will be kind of building it as we go.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay.
It's great to see the process is already established of maturing things. That's something that I wasn't really envisioning, that this is going to be a process of maturing the course.
Oh man, I mean, we've finally done things for like the first time, and we can start to see what the model looks like by looking back. And so, yeah, I hope that these approaches are starting to be clear enough to people, because that's the real goal, right? 2023, the goal is to kind of blow the lid off of leadership and decision making at Gimbal Labs, and to really use that dandelion metaphor to distribute it as much as we possibly can. So let's zoom in on Plutus PBL for a moment, okay? And what I'm trying to do here is just, I don't know if these words are right yet, but what I want this page to show is why we're working on each of those things and a very clear next step, okay? So for example, hopefully this makes sense based on your experience. We provide this course as a free service because we want to help people start building. We know this is necessary. But of course, there's organizational motives, right? By running this course, some of us have started to develop really high levels of trust with each other. And that allows us to build things together and launch new collaborations, okay? So yes, Plutus PBL is a free course, but we hope that it becomes this engine of launching new collaborations, some of which will take place here, right, within the bounds of Gimbal Labs, and others which will operate completely independently. And there's no value judgment between those. Both of those are perfect outcomes. That's what we want to happen. And as an example of a next step, well, gosh, these incredible tools have come out in the last 5 months since the course launched. And that has implications for the course. So I'm excited for us to look together at how the course needs to be revised based on the tools that now exist. How do we keep it up to date? And then going a little deeper, we can drill down into some of these bigger goals. So this is the roadmap I'm envisioning for Plutus PBL, and it's what I wanted to bring to all of you today. So once again, you can look at this on your own if you want to. Here's the live link. Oh, we lost Mix. Okay. But take a moment and just read through what's here, and I would love to hear whatever clarifying questions you have.
It's nice to have everything that is happening in one place so that can, inform itself. Because when I came to Gimbal Labs in April, it was a big issue for me. I couldn't find what everyone is working on, and yeah, now it's an improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, 2 years into this journey, we're finally making progress.
Well, I can share a little bit of positive news, which nobody will understand.
We were making progress before. It just kind of looked weird.
Say what?
Expressing progress.
Ah, okay.
And I have some, so we have talked about expanding beyond the first, Plutus PBL, and how do we get into the more advanced topics. And there's like kind of more obvious paths that one could take, going more down the front end, or the strictly Plutus, or the security aspect of best practices and optimization, track paths. So some of those could be individual PBL paths that one could take. And then the other key tasks you mentioned, was it a key task? Maybe it was the guiding question, but defining teams, or what are the responsibilities of a team to produce a PBL. Somebody needs to document it or manage the video content. Somebody needs to manage the repo. So maybe just defining what those required roles of a team consists of, and that way it's like portable. Every PBL is going to require somebody to fill this role and this role and this role, and then we can just fill those seats voluntarily, potentially, as a new PBL opens up.
So at an organizational level, having some guidance for what a PBL module and a PBL course consist of.
Yeah, if it's possible to, have like a standard in a way. I mean, if it makes sense that every PBL requires this particular function of the team.
Yeah.
And that to me, that kind of begs the question of like, for any community out there around the world, how many people do they need to host or run their own PBL. You know, can 2 people do it? Does it take 5?
I just want to mirror what Curtis just said about, and yeah, that's awesome thing. And my kind of 2 cents would be is like, I personally imagine that the user for PBL is somebody who wants to build a project on Cardano, right? And for the question that Curtis is raising, it would be awesome to have maybe an overview kind of document on, okay, we have what's the minimal project on Cardano that can be like accomplished by a team, and what's the like next level set of responsibilities for like building, and yeah, which roles are, and but with the so because PPBL is for developers, and like to kind of think about on this in more technical terms, if I like and yeah, the responsibilities of the team needed, what Scott said.
Yeah, very good. All right. I just, as a note, I put that in a goal in the goals here. I just had to rearrange some things. So yeah, part of our goal here is to build upon what we've learned together in Plutus PBL and extend the PBL framework. That I think that's probably worth making this a separate project, even PBL framework, and how that's really central to tokenomics and to the organization building we want to do. Great. What else? What other questions do you have upon initial review of this doc here?
Another thought, because you're also prompting about maintaining those courses, and maybe we could have a schedule. I mean, I feel like if we just relied on the fact, oh, every time there's a major change, we should update the PBL. Well, in Cardano, especially the next year, that could be a week, that could be a month. So I think it'd be quite difficult to stay up to date with these PBLs by constantly updating them. Maybe we have a schedule, every quarter, maybe every 6 months, we revamp the PBL. And then in the meantime, we ask that the learners report any issues. And then we could potentially throw in a disclaimer, inside the PBL course itself. Hey, this feature has updated or something. We will update the course content at this time, maybe 6 months from now or whenever that is, and keep doing that, taking notes along the way of what needs to be updated, and then have a volunteer team or whoever wants to kind of go back through every set amount of time to revamp those courses. Because I feel like it's so fluid, we can't really keep up with it to that extent where the content itself is updated and changed. But maybe just throwing out disclaimers that something has changed, and I don't know, maybe we restore documentation somewhere or keep that in the course. And can we expect the original content creators, the original teachers of that course to stay with it, or how can we support potentially the learners themselves if they're coming through and they're seeing that there's something wrong and that it needs to be updated? How can we leverage them to make that change in the course?
I wouldn't want to think about it that way, Curtis. I would want to make it part of the action of being a participant in a PBL is that the goal is that they improve the PBL, kind of like if you're a guest in somebody's house, you like leave it better than it was when you arrived. And that's part of the that's part of the motivation from the very beginning, is that the student is challenged to improve the classroom. And you know, of course, that's incentivized with gimbals and all that, but I wouldn't want to be phrasing as a marketing tool that, hey, we're going to leverage you. You know, it's more like this is, you know, learning by doing, and part of the learning is seeing what could be easier in the learning process and then fixing it. This is me.
And I totally agree that that's a great opportunity. And maybe the term leverage just does, yeah, it doesn't provide that. It is an opportunity for them. And I agree. So how would that look though, right? You've produced a PBL, the learners come in, they provide the feedback, but they don't have permissions, right? Admin permissions to Canvas or Canvas. So who does that, right? Who does the changes and say this is the second cohort of the PBL? Your teachers may be long gone, or at least that team might have moved onto another PBL course. So who does that? Do we have like a team that does cohorts, and part of that team's responsibility is to take the feedback of the learners and then implement the feedback? Or what does that look like?
Yeah. Oh, this is perfect. So Curtis, you brought us directly into what these are the two main things I want to accomplish this month in December, is this plan that you're talking about, right? How exactly is it going to work? Because we know the course is going to need to be updated. It's already a bit out of date now. And so there's real honest work that needs to be done. So what's the protocol for course maintenance? Who needs permission, right? And then what we're mostly talking about here is this one, course maintenance, but it kind of goes into expansion of the course. Like, okay, what's the process for adding a new module, for example? What kind of guidance can we provide about what a module entails? And if we start to elucidate that, then of course we're also talking about new courses, right? Because a course is just a collection of modules, really. And by the way, I think I've said this before, but it's always worth repeating. One of the reasons we chose Canvas is because of the modularity of course materials. So every one of the modules in the current Plutus PBL course can be imported into another course. So every time a course gets built, it can optionally provide modules that people might pick and choose from in different ways, right? Oh, well, for a DevOps PBL, I don't need people to understand everything about Plutus, but maybe there's one module that I want to revisit, for example. So thanks. This is a great start. So I just took, this is again, goal for December, it's not even December yet. Abdel Karim reminded me that it's still 2022 yesterday, which feels really exciting. So as we jump into this final month of the year, these are the two things I hope we can accomplish together. Let's have a plan for those ongoing revisions. And let's have a list of things we want to be learning about right now, because that's the first step to making a new module, right? We recognize that there's a need. We decide who's going to help out by learning about it first, and then put together those next modules.
James, some of those questions Curtis is bringing up, I mean, you know, like who can make the revisions? I mean, isn't that part of, I mean, haven't we been talking about evolving authentication tokens? You know, like your key to participating in Plutus and is that token, and as you progress through the modules, that token evolves. I mean, was just
Definitely. So we do have to distinguish for now, not forever, between a on-chain Cardano native asset and access to Canvas. I hope that we're using NFTs to log in to Canvas soon enough. But there's an example of another, aspirational development task. But yeah, I mean, there's access levels, and a bunch of people already have teacher access to the course and can edit it. A couple of students of the current course who have joined us since July have offered their support and asked for that teacher access, and I've just given it to them. Right now, something a little bit more official there is obviously necessary, and let's be honest, without funding, there's limits to what all of us feel comfortable asking each other to do. And so it's great to be thinking, okay, well, who's going to do that work? This is course maintenance is hard, time-consuming work that I'm doing because I believe, I recognize it needs to be done, and my time is limited, but it should be a job, right? And so a lot of what we're also doing here, had a lot of great conversations at the summit. Organizational level funding is closer than ever, but it's still not here yet. But the kind of in the background of all of this work, I want to start building this org chart so that when we do have the funding, we're able to say, all right, already got this team in place. Here's what's required to keep the course up to date, for example. So we're practicing towards that right now. We're all doing a dance of having nothing guaranteed. But the reason I'm willing to work as hard as I am is I believe this is going to be worth it someday, right? So I hope that the imperative to keep the course up to date, if you recognize that and you recognize in yourself a way to contribute to that, that's work that can be taken on. Okay, so there's all of this. We have a lot to figure out, but this is exactly what I hope to accomplish this month, is saying, yep, course is out of date, needs to be updated. Here's the plan for doing it. Now, this also brings us into the GPTE, so we can switch back to PPBL, but kind of hand in hand with this. And at least, there's not enough tokens yet, and Gimbals, we still have to build up their value for compensation to be truly meaningful. But wrapped up in decision-making around PPBL is the dapp that we're using to organize that work. So we have the live version. The latest version is the one running on Plutus V2 contracts as of yesterday. I changed the metadata key and ran this transaction yesterday to commit to just an example bounty on pre-prod. So this whole thing is working. And when it comes to what work needs to be done, like we've talked about, one of the reasons for running this is just to continue to build up our capacity as a team. The more devs here who know how to use this thing, the more reach we have to help other communities implement an instance, to start taking on contracted work for implementing this for other teams. But in addition to that, there's some important work that needs to be done to make this thing easier to use. For example, this interface for the issuer to distribute completed projects, I want to give like a couple hours grace period for anybody who wants to take this task on. But to me, this one's urgent. because I'm tired of using bash scripts to distribute bounties, and I just want to use the front end. So if nobody takes this within the first, let's call it a day that this thing is live, this is the first thing I'm going to commit to right here because I want it done. Okay. And so here we are. A lot of this stuff is essential. And further documentation, for example, revising videos in the PPBL course is at the top of my mind. So I think we could call this category whatever we want. If we want to call it just specifically PPBL maintenance, that's fine. But at the top of my mind, when we talk about GPTE, is everything we're talking about here when it comes to ongoing revision. I want people to build up a reputation if they're helping to refine the course, if they're helping to add modules or even creating the systems and processes, right? Creating that document like Curtis is talking about for, hey, what is the process, right? What do we have to do if we're collecting and then acting on feedback from learners? And so that brings me to the roadmap for GPTE. Yeah, we're going to release the initial version of this maybe by the end of this week. We have to get the completion token worked out, but I want to cover that specifically tomorrow if there's not time today. But with GPTE is for us to be sharing the work of defining these project descriptions. And what I want to ask you about today is, how does it sound if, at least for the next, if we say from now through the end of January, could we dedicate as much time as we need during one of the weekly live coding sessions simply to review these project descriptions together to make sure that it's appropriate and exciting what's listed here, and all of this really represents necessary work. I would love to be where like an immediate and hands-on form of Gimbal Labs government takes root, is us sitting here making sure that we all agree with what these project descriptions say, what the amount of funds are for each one, and writing new ones when they're missing, right? Writing new PBL project descriptions. So I'm trying to connect a lot of dots there, but any questions about anything I just said, or at a high level, how much sense is that process of going from PBL to GPTE to governing the work that needs to be done? Are you following along?
I do have a couple questions. So some of this, like the metrics that you're using, the ADA, the gimbals, even the descriptions of these tasks, they're quite informed, in my opinion, right? Like, so the decisions that went into this is quite informed. So how if we try to collectively work on this, I feel like almost everybody needs to be as informed, like how much ADA is in the Treasury that we all have, that this GPTE has access to, and how much gimbals does it have access to? Do we spend 100% of it right now, or are we going to get another allocation? Is the GPTE going to get another allocation in the future? Like, those are all factors, I think, that go into the decisions being made, but the descriptions and stuff, that's a great thing to review. And then I had a curiosity, because I've been thinking a bit about it. People in the community are starting to get familiar with D work. I'm starting to see a lot of communities use D work. And tell me if I'm going down the wrong path, but can that be integrated? This is the Treasury and the Escrow itself, but can it be represented by a front end like D work potentially? So an integration just because some communities are becoming much more familiar with D-work, or is that more like competition and we're trying to make it better, doing it differently?
Perfect.
I'll jump right in there and say, I feel like it's really conflicted to go to something that's built on Ethereum or a Plutus PBL thing, you know, like we should be doing our own thing and our own framework for that work that D-Work's providing. It's been useful, right, for Swarm, one or two other groups, but the people who kind of initiated that effort to put that work on D-Work are cross-chain platform advocates. And, you know, I would not say that Gimbal Labs is against cross-chain collaborations, but our fundamental purpose is to build out the Cardano ecosystem. So I would not want to do that or see that. But I'm not
Okay.
y'all, right? You know, like I understand if people think about it differently.
Well, I'd like to hear that, like, you know, what your perspective is, because in you know, the way I'm seeing it, which could be wrong, absolutely, is that D-Works in this case just the front end. It's just the essentially the front end that's representing it. There is no Ethereum smart contract or anything that's running on the background, and they are supposedly funded by Swarm to integrate with Cardano directly. And I don't know what the status is of that, but I'm just seeing it as a front end. So not that it's supporting Ethereum or even cross chain at this
Right.
moment, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just still, I feel like.
So taking those questions one at a time, Curtis. Yeah, the guiding principle of Gimbal tokenomics is that doing leads to effective decision making. Okay, so what we want to do more than anything is help people become informed in the way you're talking about by starting from action. One way to become more informed, my hypothesis, is that we work on these project tasks together. Because as people read through these and they ask clarifying questions, they'll recognize what they don't know. Oh, I don't have a gauge on if these amounts of gimbals in ADA are correct, because I'm not really sure what the total amount of funds is. All right, well, is this information sufficient, right? So there's this much in the Treasury right now. For some people, okay, oh, that's what's in the Treasury. Cool, that's all the information I need. Others will say, well, okay, well, where did that come from? We need a better record of how this ADA is coming from the Gimbal stake pool and into here. And maybe people want a voice in deciding how Gimbal pool rewards are allocated among different project treasuries, or how Gimbals are allocated from working group treasuries or in the future through allocations. But hopefully you can see that in any of those decisions, it's the action of coming together, becoming informed, so that we know what questions to ask, right? And then we can make those decisions together. So I hope that it's reassuring here. And if it's not, let's work until it is. How this process I'm suggesting is designed precisely because I agree with exactly what you're saying, right? Governance requires people to be informed. Let's create spaces for people to be informed. And the one thing I'm gonna, you know, like I want to make Gimbal tokenomics a community effort. And as I go from being a founder to being more of an equal community member, the thing I'm going to keep bringing to the table is my conviction that I think we should have a stronger line between action and decision making. To the second question, should we integrate GPTE with D-Work, or are these competitors? I don't think at all really in terms of competition, because this ecosystem is still so small. I want to see tools like this get into the hands of people who need them. And GPTE is an open source project, which means that anybody who wants to can choose to take on the project of integrating it with D-Work. Personally, that's not something I can imagine spending time on anytime in the next 6 months. But if anybody asked for permission to do that, I would say, oh my gosh, heck yeah, please. And whatever you figure out, please come present it at live coding. To the cross-chain thing, I mean, cross-chain solutions are going to appear. And we always have to ask ourselves, what's the value in that? The only reason I'm focused only on Cardano is not because of the Cardano part, but because of the focus part. I believe deeply in the power of focus. And I know that if I was trying to learn how to develop on 3 blockchains right now, I would be learning less than I am by focusing on Cardano development. Lucas, what do you think?
Yeah, I think everything is very, very interesting that you're talking about, but I just have a very practical question about GPTE, because I'm, as you know, I haven't looked into the code and I'm not 100% of a tech person. So does it have an internal database, and what technology is it using for that?
Excellent. Okay. And this is why the course exists, right? Is to walk people through using the dapp as it currently exists. And that's why minimum completion of the course is a prerequisite to taking on any of these projects. Okay, and that's not going to change. But to give you the short version, there's not yet any database on this project. All we have is what's on chain and what's in the front end template. We do rely on a couple of APIs. So there's a bunch of GraphQL calls within the front end to this project, but there's not yet a database.
So these labels, this
sorry,
basket of, sorry.
Oh, just really quick. Early on, people who were looking at this recognized, hey, there's going to need to be a way maybe to ask questions about a project description right here. So when I read about the project, if I'm not sure, I should have the ability to like post a question and somebody can respond to me right here. Something like that, that's going to require a separate database. And I think that would be a really good thing to build. Our responsibility is to continue to help incoming devs understand like how we got to the point of saying, okay, this quote unquote decentralized application does have a database instance over here. But the reason we chose to spin up that database is where else are comments going to go, right? And this also gives us a pathway into Dandelion PBL. If you start to build instances of project treasuries and escrows, those comments, I mean, and to oversimplify it, and this is, I'm just saying it just because this is an example of what we want people to understand. But you can imagine that if all those comments lived on a single server, they could be censored, right? If somebody ever had a reason to blacklist people or censor comments, they'd be able to do that. And now we launch ourselves into Dandelion and say, okay, even for a simple back end that's hosting, say, comments, would it be good if that was distributed? Aha, here's a guiding question to bring into Dandelion. We got to think about distributed databases and that kind of thing. And now there's a whole nother rabbit hole that hopefully some people choose to go down.
So Dandelion could serve as an extension of your wallet identity and etc., and as extension of the data of the blockchain to add cheaper metadata to things.
Dandelion hosts third-party services. One example of a third-party service is a database. And if you want that to be resilient and distributed, we can look at ways to host it there. We have a long relationship with Ikigai Technologies, who's using Flurry databases. Roberto's looking closely at the Threefold network and using both their hardware and their token to maybe incentivize dandelion development. But yeah, people are just getting to the point of appreciating the need for those things to be hosted in a resilient way.
And profitably.
Yeah, I was making a note. So Ikigai Tech is using Flurry. Is that it? And what was the other one you said?
Threefold network.
Threefold. Okay, cool. This is really interesting because, like, instead of IPFS, it's IP database.
Oh,
Right.
IPLD. We got to learn about that. That's so. I know
Does that exist as well?
We're never going to get bored. You know, the moment you catch up on everything else, I have a note to myself to like do the IPLD onboarding docs.
Okay, cool.
That'd be a fun thing
So
to do.
just so I understand as well, the data that we have on screen now for the bounties themselves is being stored on the blockchain?
Okay, excellent. So now let's go into the architecture of this. So the data for these project descriptions here, both the metadata I can see here, these amounts, and the descriptions, everything from here down to the button, basically this box. Okay. All of this is in markdown files. Front end projects folder is full of markdown files. So this is our database, okay, for project descriptions. But they're just hosted in a Git repo and then deployed to the front end, right? And this is, if anybody's ever done the Next.js tutorial, this is what it shows you how to do, right? Is how to build up a headless or a serverless, sorry, content management system using Markdown.
Okay, great.
The innovation of this dapp is that we take the text of that project description that's written in the Markdown, along with the amounts of ADA and gimbals, and we calculate the Blake 2B hash of that data. And we put this data on chain. Okay, so this project hash here is generated by the front end, starts with 464A. And then down here at the bottom of the page, this is obviously not going to go in the production version, but I'm leaving all of this formatted data here to help people learn how the system works. And what you can see is when we build up the on-chain transaction metadata for the commitment here, we pull in that hash from the front end. The Treasury inline datum has a list of valid hashes. So actually this transaction would fail right now because this project hash is not in the Treasury datum right here. So to summarize, we're using the front end as our content management system. Anybody can look at that data. And then we're using some on-chain tools to validate via this Blake 2B hash that that bounty is the one that was, first of all, approved by whoever the Treasury issuer is, and therefore placed in this list on chain. And anybody who commits to a bounty can verify that it still says the thing they signed up for. If somebody commits to bounty number 1 with this hash, and then me as the issuer, I go in after they commit to it and I say, I'm only going to give them 50 gimbals for that. Or I'm going to add requirements, so they have to do more. Well, if I did any of that, the project hash would change. And that contributor would be able to come to me and say, hey, you know, when I committed to this, the project hash was this, but now I'm seeing the project hash changed. Can you show me what changed? And anybody's going to be able to go and look at the commit logs in the front end, and they're going to be able to see that, you know, the evil issuer was adding requirements and reducing rewards.
Okay, great. That's really interesting. I also had a question when we were talking just now about the gimbals and etc. Do you have any document at all in terms of sizing things? The way I phrased this was, do we have some guidelines or document around the value of gimbals? Or is like the history of this, these bounties going to be sort of a measurement of that?
The latter, exactly. Right.
Okay.
We're
I had
launching the
that
work
feeling.
right now. Yeah.
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 Cool. Okay. Okay, next, I'm just gonna shut up, but I wanted to point out that Suraj Dutta was asking a question about localization packages, or how we can, do we have some kind of standard for community starter kit to incorporate with local cultures? If you scroll up on the chat, it's right there. I think it was a very interesting question, because I'm on the Cardano for non-text. I'm also spinning off the different languages and going through that process.
I'm reviewing. Yeah, new Gimbal Labs community. Good. Okay, so yeah, let's go through these questions one at a time. From the earliest days of Gimbal Labs, the vision for all three of us founders, and I think a lot of people who have stuck around for any amount of time, is that Gimbal Labs should be a forkable enterprise. Whatever we do, we want people to be able to take it and make it their own. And it was really validating. The new book, The Network State, is getting a lot of press lately. I was able, partly because I traveled a bunch, to listen to the entire 7.5 hours of interview between Lex Friedman and the author of Network State, Balaji. Forget what his last name is. And what he talks about in the Network State is that network states have to be forkable. And so that felt really validating to hear him talking about that. Now, in any code repo, if I'm going to be able to fork it and make it my own, the documentation better be really good. So we have work ahead of us when it comes to making it easier for people to fork the work we're doing, right, and take it on. And so I agree. Can we have some kind of standard community starter kit? Yeah, we absolutely need that. So one of the things I've gotten used to saying over the last 2 years, right, is if you see something that needs to happen and is not happening yet, that's called an opportunity, right? I have not yet written that starter kit personally, just because of the number of hours in a day. I wish it already existed. So when we talk about this entry point to governance, writing up descriptions of work that needs to be done, this is exactly what I'm talking about. People identifying things, hey, I think we need this. Bring that to the meeting. Let's write a description together, or even better, go to the repo, look at the template, and have something drafted already. Show up for a live coding session and say, hey, I was thinking about this thing that I think needs to be done. I drafted a project description and I'd like to share it with everybody. This is how stuff gets done. And that's why, once again, at Gimbal Labs, what we are going to emphasize, I believe in a really impactful way, is a direct relationship between action and decision-making. You want to be a person who decides what happens at Gimbal Labs? Awesome, do it, right? That's going to be at the heart of our tokenomics. What's really exciting lately is that there's a bunch of groups globally taking it on themselves. They're not waiting for Gimbal Labs to express a vision and a roadmap about setting up communities, but we've got Gimbal Labs Indonesia just choosing to define itself right now. There's a bunch of PBL students and Andreas is already a Cardano ambassador as well. They're launching Gimbal Labs Indonesia. They're using their model to help other people think about if they want to launch some affiliate like that. What does that mean? I don't know. We're about to find out, but that's the beautiful work, right? We're going to learn more because other people just started doing something than anything that could be expressed in a vision document or a roadmap. And I hope that people are getting that message loud and clear, that that's the space we are creating here. And it takes trust to want to do that. But that's one of my goals with Plutus PBL. I think learning together helps people build enough trust that they can, risk launching a project like that. So the other thing we got to think about, like I said, take some time to think about whether this bit right here makes sense about these notes. There's still too many words on this page, but it's all pretty essential, right? We want to organize work, build reputation, and have this example of a headless dapp. The repos are here and then linked again here. How do we make it accessible? We know we need the best documentation possible. Course completion tokens. I hope this is what we can focus on tomorrow. And this is where I'm really trying to get, is shared ownership of these project descriptions. Okay. And so hopefully, starting as we release this thing and as people are now able to take on projects, I hope that we can build up some systems for regularly. For me, I think it would be worth it, like I said, to do it this weekly for a month or two. The first thing we do at live coding could be just to review the current list of project descriptions and then to open the floor to people adding those. And as we do so, we will be starting to define a critical governance system. What do you think? Oh, cool. Some questions in Discord. Okay. My aspirational second agenda item today was about just redeploying GPTE. Adrian, thanks for pushing those changes earlier. And I want to walk people through on video the process of testing just running the transactions for GPTE Plutus v2 on Cardano CLI, which includes the reference scripts and the inline datum, and then configuring it in the front end. But maybe the one thing I can just show you for now. Let's take a quick look at configuration goals, because this will help us start to imagine what the documentation needs to be. I'm pretty sure it's not perfect yet, but we're pretty close. We're closer than before to all of the instance variables for a GPTE being in the, that's the, I need the front end, in the Cardano Plutus folder. And I can change this. And so, for example, right here, we've got the policy ID and the token name for issuer access. We've got the policy ID for the contributor token. We've got the entire asset ID for a test gimbal on pre-prod. And then the contract address, the metadata key we're going to use in transactions to post the metadata, and the CBOR itself. And this won't be necessary forever. We'll replace this with a transaction hash to a reference script. But we still haven't quite got that part working. We can use the Plutus v2 logic, but the CSL is still giving us headaches with actual transaction serialization if you use a reference script. But what I want you to see here is that when it comes to configuring an instance of this front-end app, all it's going to take is to go into these two files here and change the necessary parameters. I gotta go through this one more time just to confirm that there's not any like dangling hard-coded values anywhere. Yeah, cool. So that's a good spot to stop for today. But what we can test, maybe I do want to integrate Adrian's changes, and I'll be testing those. I might be able to swing by like the Discord voice channel today or tomorrow to do that if anybody just wants to learn that together. But let me ping you if that time opens up. Yeah, Lucas, let's finish up with something you've got.
Well, I started with something weird. I'm trying to be to participate a bit more, but I don't want to be throwing weird things at you because I work on several different things. So I'm just sharing my screen, and this is something that I came up with today out of the talk that you were mentioning, the network state. At a point, the author is talking about gold, fiat, and Bitcoin as being V1, 2, and 3 of money. And so I started thinking of the aspects. So these are the main aspects that I started spreading out in this sheet. And then I went to 0, which is the commodities. And then these are more elaborate only for the crypto side. But I wanted to give you a few seconds to look at this and tell me what stands out as mostly incorrect or something, or incomplete. Sorry, just trying to get my Zoom. Oh, yeah. What do you think?
Who's the audience?
Well, this is something that I'm not sure, to be honest. It's just me structuring concepts, but I do have a landing page that I'm going to build called Crypto 123, where maybe I'm going to use this part. I actually ran this by the non-technicals this morning, and so from that discussion we decided this should be just one thing, and then maybe this part can be the other part.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
because it's a bit too dense, and this doesn't really apply for those. So, well, actually, maybe, but yeah, not here. The main thing that I thought was interesting is that the scarcity, or the fact that it's not inflatable, inflationable would be the word, right?
So technically that's, to be honest, I think some of this can be considered subjective in a way,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
That you referenced Cardano, that
Yeah.
it's rock solid and you can't change or the inflation. Well,
I could split these
technically,
two. Yeah,
Charles has actually commented, right, that the
I heard.
governance of Cardano allows, if the whole
Mhm.
community decided they could, right?
Yeah, I was there looking at him, and if my eyes were like, wait. Okay,
And then
but
some of the
Well,
others that like tens of hacks versus still maturing. I agree. I think these are good metrics.
mhm.
The objective is to stay objective though, versus potentially debatable or arguable.
Okay, so yeah, let me know if you have any more thoughts. I'm just going to strike these as a bit more subjective, and I'm going to rephrase them, all of these. Anything else for now? Do you think in overall it's a good tool to show people, or?
I like it a lot. I would have no problem saying that Cardano's decentralized, right? I mean, it is. I mean, like nobody controls the protocol. You know, it takes, you know, right now it would take 51% of stake pool operators to change it.
So you're talking about this one here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
can't
do
speak
feel
to,
that
I can't speak to other layer ones that are out there. I don't, you know, the ones that I am aware of don't seem very decentralized to me.
Okay. Great.
and I would almost venture to say, again, trying to stay more objective, that it is the most decentralized. However, without the decentralization index number that's supposedly, coming out at some time in the future,
Mhm.
nobody can prove our claims. So if our claim is it's the most decentralized, nobody can necessarily prove that until that index is there. But we can say it's the most decentralized.
Okay. Cool.
Just as a matter of words, you asked about inflationable. I think it should probably be inflationary.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
And digital scarce matter, right next to it. There's only one S in scarce. I'm just,
Where?
yeah.
Okay.
Right next to that, in the green box to the right. Crypto is the invention of digital.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Matter is just
CE.
one.
No, and scarce only is spelled SCARCE.
Like this?
Yeah. I
Okay.
am the grammar Nazi for Cardano, so.
Thank you so much.
Talk about it.
Okay.
Thank
I don't want to take
goodness.
much more of your
So
time,
glad
but
you're here.
I thought it's good to have some feedback, and thank you so much. I'll drop the link for this if anyone wants to ping me. I'm Lucas on the server as well, so keep in touch.
Cool. Thanks for listening to the overview today. Please keep questions coming. I know I kind of just shared a lot, but I'm going to continue to work on this roadmap doc, and I'm very, very excited to share ownership of these project descriptions. I want to figure that out together. And we don't know exactly how to do it yet, but we're going to learn over the next few weeks. Tomorrow we'll talk completion tokens, metadata. We can start with a little demo before making final decisions, because once we have final decisions about that completion token, we're ready to deploy this thing. And I think it might happen by the end of day Friday. That's my soft goal here. So let's see if we can get there. I'll jump into the garage if I have some time. I might have a little bit of time before town hall, like 90 minutes from now, like a half hour. or after like 3 o'clock today. I'll try to spend a little time there. Otherwise, see you tomorrow for talking tokens. Thanks, y'all. See you soon.
See ya.
Yo.
Great. Yeah.